Hello and welcome to the second episode of Higgscast Playing God. And today we'll be looking at power scaling, level scaling, and difficulty scaling in terms of running a game and playing it. With me as always is Jesse Cromines
Hi, hello. I've got the WWE intro now, and I'm excited.
and Xander Nolan.
Hey, man.
Classic Heyman with the period at the end. So,
Hey, yeah, hey man. It's all lowercase. Hey man. Period.
yeah, he capitalizes the H. I hope that came through
So,
with the recording.
no, he's real edgy. He capitalizes the E.
Oh, yeah. Hey!
Hey man. Be like, hey, hi, hey.
So one of the things
So
that
difficult. So scaling.
Yeah, scaling. Because one of the things that is a big problem for a lot of games and a lot of people running it is how to take the story and thereby the mechanics into an upper echelon, or really just make it fun throughout the entire thing.
Yeah. So that it doesn't. It's the same amount of difficulty the whole way through, or appropriate varying difficulty at appropriate times. And that's the fucking like where you have things like huge party wipes in a one shot, or you fucking things are too easy and combat's boring, and loot means nothing. And it's a lot of things stem from it because the whole plight of the hero is conflict, and the conflict has to be good.
We touched on it last time in regards to D&D and how linear their progression is. You'll pretty much
Def-
always be fighting some variant of like goblins right out the gate. Maybe something like skeletons, zombies, just crunchy stuff that usually has CR less than 1 or
yeah, one or less.
and then that progresses on to greater and greater things to the point
Mhm.
where fighting 50 goddamn skeletons at level 10 is just like, do we
Yeah,
really have to do this? This is just going to take 2 hours and nobody's going to gain anything out of it.
exactly. It's gonna be
Yeah.
a modicum of experience and not that fun.
Now, the way I've always approached doing the scaling is if you have a monster, like, I like to make the encounters that you guys deal with as characters throughout the campaign for the encounters to mean something more. So if you have an entire campaign where you're going to go up to level 20, but the big bad creatures that you're dealing with are just goblins and that's it, and it's a goblin campaign, as it were, then just simply adding character levels to be comparable to the party is, I think, the simplest way of doing that.
And I remember you touched on that last time. And I tried dabbling in stuff like that in one of my previous games with like some level thugs. Um, and I found it was like, save for adding a level or two of fighter, it was a lot to keep up with because I was like, all right, they have this HP, they have this hit dice, and because I was running a room of, let me think, it was 6 Minotaur butlers, 2 high level NPCs that actually had character sheets, and then 6 guards who were bandits with 3 levels in fighter each, which I just made them champions, and that it was a lot to keep up with because it was an important scene, and I couldn't make the lackeys not fall like tissue paper, even with 3 levels of fighter, because I forgot all their stuff. I forgot like action surge and second wind and all that shit. I forgot that they crit on 19 because they went with champion instead of like Battlemaster or Eldritch Knight or whatever. And I just the fight wasn't. If I had put bigger things in the room instead of beefing up guys, it would have been easier for me to keep up with. If I had done it right, I think it'd have gone better. But I found it difficult to do.
In my experience, pretty much any time you introduce a spellcaster that has a character sheet as an enemy, it gets all sorts of jacked up. Because
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's where
and
things get
very
hard.
very
like what
unpredictable.
Jesse was saying, like it's too much to keep track of because you're never
Yeah,
gonna be as good with those with as good with 3 or 4 characters as the party is with their one that they've been with
Yeah,
for
as
like
a player
15
is.
levels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They'll know the ins and outs, and you'll be like, "Oh shit, I did forget to use Action Surge. I could have
Yep.
beaten the shit out of you."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes that'll make for lackluster combat, though it could also make it a lot more amazing. It definitely makes it a lot harder and make sure that people keep track of what the enemies can do instead of just like spitball.
Spellcasting is another thing entirely, man. Like, especially with wizards, like actual NPC wizards, it just becomes fighting a spell book. And like, if you look at some of the CR for the characters in Volo's Guide to Monsters, they add more non-player characters, and they have like an illusionist, an evoker, and they're all basically the exact same stats. Like, one's a diviner, one's a this, one's a that. And the evoker and the conjurer are like thousands of XP more than their like necromancer and transmuter and abjurer counterparts, because they have the kick-ass spells. And it's, if you pick an NPC and you've like, I did this one time. They went on a trip to somewhere in the Shadowfell, and there was an archmage, and I was just gonna have him be like scenery and throw some damage in every now and then they started fucking with him by firing like +2 arrows at them that they had found previously. And I was like, okay, let me actually look at this guy's list instead of spitballing what spells he has. And he had fucking power word kill and disintegrate and all this really like crazy stuff. And I was like, I mean, he's trying to kill you, and I have to stick with this, so let's hope this doesn't kill you. And like, it's like you said, the second you start adding spell books and wizards and shit, it gets crazy.
I've forgotten many times, like spells that I specifically put into a character just to make them do a certain thing, and then it's like something changed on the battlefield, and at the end of the battle he's dying and he's letting out his dying scream and his last words, and then I think to myself, fuck, he had that.
Yeah, he had Globe of Invulnerability. Shit,
would have been real nice before he had the Globe of Dead ability.
Yeah.
And this stuff can apply to even games that aren't Dungeons and Dragons, of course. Even stuff that has established like powered level bad guys or good guys in a lot of cases as well. Let's talk Shadowrun. With Shadowrun, you can find
I was
fucking
thinking
thug on the side of the road.
We pretty much got the line.
Yeah, thug on the side of the road, and this guy, I mean, you could probably just, if for some reason you wanted to fight him in the middle of broad daylight, then you could probably just beat him real easy after a certain point. But since NPCs work on the karma system too, and you can easily get those guys more powerful, he could just shoot you in the face.
I remember when I was rolling around in the Shadowrun subreddit for the longest time, somebody was talking about their favorite character death. And they were doing just that. They went up to an enemy gang and just some regular gray blob piece of shit guy, and they were talking shit, getting in his face real hard. All the dude had, all this gangster had on him, which the PC didn't know, was a quick draw for a Derringer in his right hand. So he had a quick draw slide for a Derringer and 2 bullets in his little holdout pistol. And all the guy did was made an attack. The guy failed his surprise reent. He failed his reent completely, and the guy decided he'd edge it. He'd just like, whatever. I'm the GM. I'm gonna edge this, and he killed him. He stuck it in his mouth, and blew this PC's head off with a fucking holdout pistol.
Guns hurt.
Guns
hurt. And that's the thing, is there are steps to go around that. Like I feel that Shadowrun is a lot like Dark Souls, the video game, in that your character may get a little bit better, and they may get a lot better, especially if you find good stuff. But the most important thing that levels is the player behind it. As long as you know how to fucking play this, you don't need all the fancy stuff. And that's like a scaling that I don't see anywhere else, where like people get smarter at it, or they see what works best. They see why they need, a pound of Semtex and like a pistol. Whereas some guys like, I need a tank. It's like, no, we can, you get wiser throughout it. and I think it's something not many other games have.
That's true. But it still also has the like more powerful enemies just by default.
Yeah,
You got to work towards anyway, like Red Samurai
which
or dragons.
which even then
Like
it's
really, you
even
shouldn't
in
ever
the
be
setting
fucking
of
with, but
right. It like it's one of the rules is don't ever cut a deal with a dragon. Like it's intrinsic to survival is don't fuck with them.
there can become a point much farther down the line where it might be
Hmm.
feasible for you to fight maybe like one dragon, and by fight I mean plan for like 5 sessions at least, and then
Yeah,
get
seriously.
like every ally you've ever known to come help.
To kill one dragon.
Yep, hopefully.
These dragons have like what 20 essence and like rating 15 or 20 magic
Yeah, depending
and
on the
like
dragon, it could get like 35 strength.
yeah, like it gets to be like D&D numbers. For reference, the like highest natural occurring human strength in existence in Shadowrun is a 6.
Even
Whereas a
augmented,
dragon can
can't you
have like
just
a
like crank it up to like
yeah.
only a 9 or a 10, even like with
No,
the
it's
best
10
technology?
because it's modified as 4 past the original number. So for a human is 10. Like RoboCop had a strength of 10, and a dragon has 3.5 times that.
Makes
Roughly.
sense. It's way bigger
Yeah,
than RoboCop.
it's
made of
just
magic.
crazy. Yeah, doesn't give a shit about you.
It'll eat you for breakfast.
And that's the thing is that it's the scaling is there's like it levels pretty easily. You get XP, you spend it on a pretty clear basis, on an exponentially increasing in price basis. But it's the bigger and bigger jobs, and especially when you can just say no, this isn't something I'm going to do. And it's less about heroics and more about loot and the profit of it. So it is much different in D&D in that way. And turning tail from a fight or leaving people behind and taking a loss is part of it. And like I said, that comes with the wisdom of it. Is it's really difficult to scale that. Like if after a year of playing and this character still doesn't know not to mess with an Ares fucking like Roto Patrol, they shouldn't be playing.
As far as scaling NPCs up for like Shadowrun, it's really easy. But I was looking into scaling NPCs for games like World of Darkness, and that is intrinsically so much more complicated. And
What?
like, because you have to have a character sheet for it to really make any difference for any named or even Grey Blob NPC. And they've got to be they've like, because a human dealing with a werewolf, you're just gonna squish them. So that's kind of makes sense. But if you're gonna have an NPC that can keep up with an Arun werewolf, they've got to have some buff, and you got to have stats for that. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. And keeping up with that is, God, it was awful. It was so much more difficult than D&D ever has been.
Mm-hmm. The very few times I have run World of Darkness, I would always operate under the rule of 3 and 2, which is they have 3 hit boxes and they can be filled with whatever, and then of 2 in that they have basically all of their stats, physical, mental, social, are 2. And so that like resistances are pretty clear of like 4, and then their hitbox, like they shoot you in the face, they do 2 damage, it becomes 2 lethal. Cross, somebody punches you in the face, and they're out.
Yeah,
Draw my fist into his face.
Yeah, it's a good move. It's a classic.
It's good.
The Hank Farmer classic, or the 8 Ways classic. Excuse me. And I always approach scaling in World of Darkness with the same way I would in Shadowrun, which was the incorrect way, because I don't really give a shit about the splat books in World of Darkness. I always like mortal stuff. I would just give them better gear. I'd give them bulletproof vests. I'd give them a better gun. I'd give them,
Silver bullets.
Silver bullets, exactly, stuff like that.
Fair enough.
And now I never had to deal with having an NPC roll with like splat level PCs, just because I don't think mortals should be hanging out with a fucking wizard.
I mean, it's a possibility.
I
'Cause
did that
there's
in one of the
Yeah, I know you did.
the
Piece of shit.
mage games. I was just playing a dude. I was really good at investigating though, and everybody else was just like, "I need all the combat skills ever," and it's just like, "We need to figure something out," and they're like, "Oh," and I'm sitting
Fuck.
here like,
Yeah.
"So guys, this is quite elementary.
This
You
is
see
how
all
this
the
works.
blood? Someone's dead.
That's
Congrats,
very
I solved the
much
mystery."
in the vein of games like Dark Heresy, where it's like World of Darkness is pretty brutal. Like it especially for mortals, it's pretty much if you try and fight two guys alone in an alleyway and they have baseball bats and you don't, you are dead. Period. There's no fight. It is pretty.
What if you have
Pretty
two knives?
okay. Like, I don't want to get it. Don't fucking start with
What if you have two knives? God damn it, Nick.
no. Fucking knife versus baseball bat. But what was I saying? I don't fucking remember.
You're in an alleyway. You got two guys fighting you with baseball bats, and they're gonna beat the
You're
hell
gonna
out
die.
of you because World of
it
Darkness.
very much is in the same vein as like high lethality games like Dark Heresy, and like Black Crusade, and I never played Rogue Trader, but where you have to have all your bases covered, even a little bit, and it was. And that's required in the World of Darkness as well, because it is a world of darkness. If you're all combat characters but you don't know what the hell's going on, the vampires will get the jump on you, suck your blood, and kill you. If you get stuck in an alleyway fight with some fucking heretics, and they have the high ground on you, and all you have are chain swords, you are fucked. You have to have a dude who can throw some damage, who can like hurl some lead, or a psyker who can like hop up there and you take some dudes out.
Or get
like,
a really
you
good
have
throw
to
of a
have
chainsword.
yeah, or you have to have a very light player that everyone else can throw. And so it definitely breeds. It requires you to diversify.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, is there's not a clear line of what is difficult, what your characters can take in World of Darkness and like Shadowrun and Dark Heresy. And they either have to outsmart it, you have to have picked something just shy of what they can beat, so that it's a fun fight and isn't total lame sauce. Or they don't do any of those things and the other doesn't happen and they just die. And more often than not, especially in Shadowrun, they just die.
Yeah. Even going back to the random mooks, I recall one incident with a particular guy with a shotgun who Max Payne dived his way through the entire map, and he's using everything as cover, and almost managed to beat an entire party by himself.
The scene was literally, we were walking down this fucking hyper tense, like urbanized environment that had like, 1 million people per square mile. It's crazy dense. And we're walking down somewhere, and this gang gets the jump on us from this high-rise apartment, and they start raining down on us. We head up the stairs. We return fire while we're heading up the stairs, and our melee fighter Xander at the time, wants to close distance, and I had a mage, and so I'm like, fine, I can close distance as well. And by the time we get to the door, we've taken out 3 of the 4 guys or whatever, and there's one guy left with a fucking shotgun, and he's using the table as cover. Well, I suppress with an SMG, split the table in half. Xander moves in to punch the guy. The guy retreats to the back of the couch.
By diving.
I suppressed the SMG by diving.
There's no action he took that didn't involve leaping across the room.
Yeah. And he fucking sprayed us with the shotgun, and he chipped us. We had pretty solid armor. I had mage armor. Xander was just lucky. Dude dove behind the couch. I fucking cast magic on the couch. Xander jumped behind it, dude, and it was literally a fucking Benny Hill song playing in the background, because we could not. And at one point I gave up my fucking SMG and just started magic punching the guy and trying to help Xander seal the deal. Like we were just stomping the life out of this dude, and he survived like 3 or 4 rounds after we even entered the room.
And this was like after we had dealt with rooms full of guys with like better weapons in seconds. Like, this dude just was not gonna die.
Like,
you snapped the dude's neck as a reaction.
Oh yeah, that's right, because he fell on him.
Can I go home? yeah, you can go. You can go home.
That was in
Oh.
the Kowloon facility or whatever.
Yeah, that was a different
Mhm.
facility, but it's still a hilarious
I can't believe I remembered
story.
that name as well. But yeah, like in Shadowrun, where the fucking like player characters and NPCs can die in the first round of combat just from a lucky bullet. This dude lasted 4 rounds. And it's because of the luck of the dice, honestly. I'm sure the dude's reint was only like 7 dice,
Yeah, it was
right?
pretty average. It was like I think he
Yeah.
had like 4 agility and 3 rifle or
Right.
long arm or whatever it is for shotgun.
Yeah. Fucking.
Yeah, he was around pretty average, but that dive maneuver.
Dude,
Once he
got
started
it.
doing that, I had to stick with it.
If that had been Double Jack, he'd been like, hang on, let's recruit this guy.
Oh yeah,
This
that
Max
would been,
Payne.
I would have named him. He would have added himself to that list of minor NPCs that turned out to be super important for some reason.
His name would have been Payne Maximus.
Exactly. You did it. You solved it.
Something. Mm-hmm.
That got me thinking though, with scaling enemy NPCs, I was thinking like you also gotta be sure to reflect that the players are getting better, not just with like the
Right.
type of shit they're fighting, because you could just throw another monster at them. Like there's different monsters,
Yeah.
different like challenge ratings and shit all day, but sometimes you gotta put them in a fight where they clearly have an advantage. Like maybe early on, maybe level like 3 or something like that. You do give them like a bunch of goblins and like one bigger dude to really beat
Yeah.
on, but you can take care of the goblins pretty easily. Like, you don't get fireball at that level, but like one fireball, and it's like, haha, look at that! I wiped out an entire
Yeah.
thing, but not overusing that.
Yeah. And that's the other thing you have to be mindful of is like what classes there are, and it burst damage, and you have to start looking at like a fucking MMO, is what healing does what, and who's got what spells where, and like there was a point in my game that I'm running, the Heroes Under Heaven game, where the cleric could just out heal any damage that was responsibly dispensed. Like I think the GM's handbook said like you should be throwing out like no more than 60 points of damage. This is like level 5 or 6. Like 60 points of damage from the enemy side per turn. Period.
Yeah, the whole enemy side.
And, right. The whole enemy side. Like, 6 guys throwing out 10 damage, 1d10 plus 5 damage. There you go. Easily calculated. And with a combination of dice rolls and, special abilities from the cleric and magical items they had, the cleric could out heal any and all damage I could throw out. And it was we were practicing our arithmetic at that point. And I had to get creative, and I had to throw like anti-magic stuff at them. I had to some of the enemies heard about these tactics and would like do certain stuff, like they'd cast necrotic spells that would reduce hit points completely, or do other things that force some saving throws. And it's difficult to have someone so good at their character that it disrupts the natural flow that you had planned, and you have to change everything around them. And I actually think it's something you wanted to talk about in Shadowrun, Nick, is the infamous Johannes bot armor 40.
That's right. He had like he managed to get it so he had a ton of magic armor, a ton of regular armor, and his body was just out of control.
So this was in Shadowrun, where, like we said, people die in a single turn. Like whole squads of people can die with a single spray of automatic fire. Where, for reference, what you do to soak damage is body and armor. You roll dice. A 5 or a 6 you get is how much you reduce the damage. Average, like a bulletproof vest was like what, 6, and then somebody's body would be 3.
It was actually higher. I think a regular bulletproof vest is like an 8, and then like full body armor is like a 10, right? Actually I think full body armor is like 14, something crazy.
So like a regular bulletproof vest is 8, average body is 3. You roll 11 dice. That's an average of 3 points of damage reduction. So it's not a lot, especially considering guns can do like 14 damage.
Yeah, they start at like minimum 7 or something like that.
Like
6, I think,
like
might be the lowest it goes.
Like holdout pistols have like 5, but the classic Ares Predator 5 pistol is 7 damage.
Mm-hmm. And guns can have armor piercing and shit too.
Yeah, and so there's all kinds of stuff. But this guy
This
had
motherfucker,
fucking
he had
this
so
motherfucker.
much. I any NPC I made that was neat that could hurt him, like just could hurt him at
Yeah,
all, even
had the
scratch him,
chance to.
had to output so much damage that if I even blinked at another one of the characters, they would just paste immediately. And trying to balance encounters around that without making it just straight unfun for the people who weren't playing Johannes was a nightmare.
Yep. Because I remember at the time, like Johannes had like I think we calculated he had a bot armor of like 38 total or something, and that's
Yeah,
an average of
he
like
boosted his body with magic. He had magic armor. He also had the good armor, and
yeah he had a riot suit, and so he was throwing lowest average 12 successes of damage reduction. You know, if somebody gets 2 net hits on an attack with an assault rifle, that's 12 damage. There you go. He just absorbed an entire, they like
yeah. And his
go
dodge was
like
good too, which was the other thing.
yeah.
So it wasn't even like you could get a lot of net hits as an enemy. You'd have to deal with like one or two maybe, and then after that it's
Time.
just like I just take it all. I'm absorbing the whole thing.
Yeah, my character, my squirrely Decker, not made for combat, uh, gangster, had a, armor laced hoodie that had like an armor rating of like 4 or 5 and a body of like 3 maybe. So that's a roll of 8, and my dodge sucked. So I was throwing maybe 2 or 3 successes for damage reduction, and he only had 8 health. If somebody pointed that same gun at me, did 12 damage, that's all she wrote. I'm dead. Like the same thing that this guy trivially absorbs kills me instantly. And that, like you said, was something that I didn't see until like a few games after you started mentioning it, and I was like, "Man, shit, you are right."
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody had their thing. Everybody had their thing that we rolled handfuls of dice at, because that's what
Well, that's
you do in
that's how I
Shadowrun.
made it work. Because
Yeah,
not everyone was always in a combat. He pretty much always was. So if I did need
right.
to point a 20 damage gun or whatever at him, then I could do that.
Yeah, if somebody had to fire a laser rifle, we know exactly who it's getting pointed at.
Because you always geek the mage first anyway, so makes sense.
Yeah,
He was really hard to
just,
geek.
Yeah, he was. I can't remember a time when he even went down. It was a requirement for Double Jack to go down every game. Like it wasn't a Shadowrun until Double Jack was filled with holes and complained about spilling his drink or something.
It's like, how bad's he bleeding? Oh, he's not bleeding that bad? Damn it, we're not even close to finished.
All right, okay, well we gotta earn our paycheck. Like the Johnson expects it now.
It's kind of also how it is for good old Kenton in Legends of Latyr.
Yes, Jesus. Ken has to die twice.
That,
You gotta outdo fucking the Jesus of the setting and die twice.
Yep. Gets dog shit beat out of him constantly though.
Xander, how many times did, when Jesse betrayed everybody, how many times did you go down just in that fight?
It was like 3 times.
Yeah, it was either 3 or 4. It was one of the two. It was a lot.
Because I was so excited. I was so excited to get somebody. I didn't care who it was. I just wanted the impact to hurt, And I was like, I'll settle for Gris. If I can't fucking kill this Weeble Wobble, then fine. I'll take this orc with me.
Hey, that impacted the entire setting.
It did. It did. But that's the thing is like, how do you work around that? How do you find the balance and like characters who are basically unstoppable and characters who are just begging to be knocked down? How is it, say for the players getting smarter, what's the best answer? And it's, you have to fucking spin plates. You have to take it moment by moment by moment and figure out what the play style is and what character is good at what. And because I remember with Johannes, dude, you made him shit his pants when we were on that fucking space station when like any type of toxin was introduced into the equation. He could not make those toxin rolls to save his life, quite literally.
Oh yeah, I started using drugs and narcotics and toxic and shit like that didn't care about his armor.
It was like on a sleep dart in Overwatch, where he's just like, I am going to take a nap, motherfucker, you're out. And then, like, it affected all of us because it made the fight really, really hard, but also really fun because we didn't roll anybody, and it required like the squishy Decker to get behind somewhere, grab Johannes' gun, and just do all kinds of shit.
Yeah.
And that made it scale. Like, and those are regular dudes, like the chick who would Eve Desicker.
Yeah, Eve Desicker.
Was
That bitch.
Jane Cassinder. Like that, she was. I can't imagine too terribly complex, but it made the fight interesting.
Yeah. Well, another thing that makes a fight interesting, and I wanted to get to that, is leveling up the terrain for particular things. Because let's go back to that same scenario. Actually, no, it wasn't that same scenario. It's still in space though, and you were dealing with them demons, and you had to traverse that one area of the space station that was blown apart.
Mm-hmm.
You had to use 0G and 0 friction in order to jump to one of those platforms, not fuck that up.
Oh yeah.
Jump to another one while simultaneously dealing with the same demons that you were pretty easily handling beforehand.
That was brutal. Because then we had to like make sure that people on the previous platform didn't fuck up, and then if they did, we had to go get it. Like that was what needed to happen. Like that was a good example.
Yeah, a little bit of terrain can go a long way.
And that kind of lends to the Dark Heresy example I gave of if you can do the exact same thing to like totally wipe a party, or like even spice up regular combat. Like, if you're used to getting in fist fights with dudes and one guy pulls a gun and you just immediately chainsaw them to death and you can handle that every time, let's put those guys on a high platform and they have, a single fire rifle, and it totally turns on its head because they have the environmental advantage. And I know you did that with lava, dude. Fucking Xander walking on lava, for Christ's sake. Like having lava in the backgrounds was a good one, because that was how in the Betrayal I got Grizz. Is I just pushed his ass in there.
That was a sweet, epic ending.
It was.
There's a time that I was also using terrain that it actually turned out to be too good by accident in Legends of Lethir.
What was that?
This was after you had left the game, and not terribly recent at this point. But it was, I originally had everyone in the party just going after to retrieve a kid who had been kidnapped, and they followed these like 5 dudes. And they actually did have character levels. There were 2 rangers.
I remember you telling me this.
There was just a dude who was basically just a dude, and then a lady who was the leader, the champion, the fighter as well. And so they're in this like pass where the rangers are up on the like ridges, and so I gave them that high ground because I knew they'd need it. I thought the entire encounter was probably going to get rolled. Instead, what ended up happening was they got their asses kicked, like all 6 waves from Sunday, and with some quick thinking and making the story better than everyone dies, they instead got captured, which got some really cool character interactions later on. But just putting somebody like, I think it was like 20 feet higher than everyone else with a bow and arrow, it made a world of difference.
And that's another thing that you bring up is, I think that's something we could talk about in a whole other podcast as well, is making the fail state not death every single time. I know one of my favorite monsters in D&D are the Yuan Tai or the Yuan Ti or the fucking whatever they're called, the snake people.
Yeah.
Their entire thing is slavery. They don't kill, they subvert. And a lot of times they'll have like enchantments or illusions or poisons or whatever. They're like less sexy drow, and they will just take you alive, and you'll wake up somewhere else. And I think especially if if they can stave off that fight, and even if they get the failure state, it's still a continuation of the story. But it's like, oh man, we're in this jail cell. What are we gonna do to get out of this one?
Yeah, that's what ended up happening. They had a whole A-team moment where I played the music and everything. And they planned out getting it out and executed an epic plan.
And I think that in itself, like changing the fail state, definitely has an impact on like the scaling of the difficulty. And it's especially helpful to throw that at your players every now and then, even if there's no like super good reason for it. Like, having a duel in the middle of the streets, like somebody calling one of your players out, and be like, "You fight me," blah. You know. I remember I did that. My assassin in my game stabbed the shit out of an orc, and the orc captain sought them out and was like, "You will fight me," blah, blah, and called her out. She didn't do very well. She got her ass handed to her because she's not used to not having her sneak dice, because it was just a duel, 1-on-1, you and me, and so it scaled things, and it both emphasized her role in the party and taught her a very valuable lesson of not to stab orcs.
Yeah. I just thought of another game that's pretty good about doing, like, kind of going with natural scaling, but more like how we've been talking about Shadowrun or World of Darkness, where it's like, even a dude with a gun can still be bad. Deadlands.
What?
Deadlands is pretty good about that, because at any time, like, you level up, because it's every 5 XP or something like that, and I'm talking about Wasted West specifically, or Hell on Earth, whatever they want to call it. And like at any point, like we've been playing for a while in the game I'm in, and even like one dude who has a rifle, he points it at you. It's like, okay, all right, man, let's calm down. Let's see where let's talk this out first.
Let's talk
do we have to do this? The more powerful you get, like the more you can handle that. And it is going back to talk like the different tactical directions you could go with any given encounter. With my character in particular, who's a radiation priest, basically, I have the option of drawing a revolver. I could just shoot back at you. I could use cool radiation magic, like pretty much laser beams and shit like that. Or I could play more on the defensive. I have spells that are like, you get armor, you get, or I could have like, be immune to the environment. Which is very useful. And one of the things you got to think about when, like, any spellcasting class where you have those kind of options, because you don't always have to just go with combat all the time. Sometimes you can't fight. You can't fight a blizzard. You can't fight. You can't fight a desert.
And I think Deadlands is one of those games that emphasizes that some of the nastiest things aren't things you can kill, or like sometimes this like making the environment and the world and these things like as much an enemy as the bandits who've been chasing you this whole time. And like, all right, we gotta make a decision. Do we stay in this town and put up with a sandstorm, or do we head out and let the bandits follow our trail where we know they're gonna and fight them? It's like Deadlands is really cool about that.
Well, another thing that's really cool is fuel. You have to you got to figure out how you're spending your fuel, because it is not common enough for you to be like, I'm going to drive around the state 3 times. You got to be like, how far away is this? 60 miles? Do we want to pay for that?
It's like, we can push the cars. We can push the car 60 miles. It'll be okay.
But even with that, like it introduces like it is a thing you can fight, but it's a thing you're really not supposed to fight. There are these things out in the West called rattlers, which they're dune worms basically, and they're just a menace. And in the setting, cars were actually initially conceived as a way to be like, I'm in Salt Lake City. How do I get out of Salt Lake City without getting eaten? Oh, we make this vehicle that can go faster than the rattlers. We win.
And one of the things I also really like in Deadlands is the wild card system. And what that is it allows you to roll a die, is a d6 for a skill check. Like a skill basically is, I'm sure everyone's familiar with a set of 7 dice, which is a d4 has 4 sides, a d6, a d8, a d10, or 2 d10s, and a d20, or a d12 and then a d20. The better you are at a skill, the bigger the die you roll. So if you're okay at something, you're rolling a d8. If you totally suck and you know nothing about it, you're rolling a d4, and it's got like a -2 to it. Yep. But a wild card always, no matter what, no matter how much they suck at a thing, always rolls a d6 as well. And I think that's a really easy and great way to make NPC seem like a threat. And especially if you do it in like a metagame sense of, you're about to roll this character's D8 and they're about to shoot you from across the bar, and you put a D6 in the dice pool you're about to roll. Everyone around the table is like, "Oh shit, fuck! I knew his hat was really nice. He's a wild card."
Yeah,
And they
'cause
see
you
his
can apply it
shot.
to NPCs, and all PCs are
Right.
wild
Yeah.
cards.
All PCs are wild cards, and seeing an NPC wild card makes you go like, "Okay, it's literally like they're a wild card in this situation. We don't know how this is going to go. Let's not tangle with them." Given how interesting and very clutch the system is, that is a very easy way to convey difficulty, even if it's not actually perceived, or even if it's not actually difficult, it's still perceived as difficult. And that, I think, is just as valuable as increasing AC or giving stat levels to a goblin.
Yeah, or sometimes even just giving anything like even a small ability that isn't normally on their sheet or their stat block or whatever can give that immediate air of mystery. Like, okay, it can do this one extra thing. We have no idea what else it can do at this point.
Yeah.
Xander, how would you handle stuff like that?
Like what specifically? The dealing with
how
overpowered
do you
characters?
usually deal with characters that are up in levels like between like 10 and 20? Like what do you do when they are at like the highest possible power rating?
One of the things that I've always described to as far as scaling and power leveling, or power scaling and level scaling and all that, is to just do as much as I can to improvise, and it's based on my experience as a GM. Because, like it or not, if you get into running games, you could be really good. You could be one of the best that your friends know of, and everybody's trying to get you to GM for them. You're still not the best that there is, and it takes a lot of experience, and it takes a lot of practice. It is practice, 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 just like with anything. And one of the hardest things to deal with is scaling monsters and also scaling inventory and loot. And when do you introduce magic weapons? When do you introduce magical things? Now I have an answer for that, specifically for D&D 5th edition, based on my experience with it so far. But it comes down to what works best in the moment. Because one of the first things it says in any role-playing game book is, this is not going to be a hard rule. This is something you can play with. This is something
I think
cool.
The rule of cool and playing it by ear.
This ain't no MMO where you gotta get to level 80 and then at that point you gotta be like, I thought I banned this guy on all chat who keeps trying to sell me gold.
Now, as far as like loot itself, that the way I figured it out for 5th edition is between level 1 and level 5, not a whole lot of anything magical. You get some cool stuff, yes, but nothing really magical. Level like 5 on to 10, or like late in 9th, you start getting into monsters and creatures that you have to do magic damage in order to hurt them.
Mm-hmm.
So a +1 magic sword for a character that's a barbarian, or the monk already has tools to do that. But that's when you start getting like the bags of holding, and you start getting things
like the staple wondrous items.
Yeah, the things that make living life as an adventurer. You've made it as far as you're known. So the abilities that you have, random encounters aren't quite as big a deal anymore, and that kind of harkens back to that. From like level 11 to level 15, that's where you start getting into like named magical items, where like these things could be cursed, but there's some really cool swords and really cool bows out there. That's when you start getting to like the oath bow and shit like that, really tough, really powerful shit. And then 15 on is when you start getting artifacts, and you start making things that you need on the fly. So that's kind of how I scale that personally. But it's different for everybody, and it's definitely dependent upon setting. I am
And,
one
yeah,
of those
it's
GMs
like-
that's a loot whore. So
And like you said, it's different on each setting. Like Nick treats every single magical item with extreme reverence in his game because it's not exactly the highest magic game ever.
You're not going to find a random +1 dagger hanging around on the ground just cuz.
Right.
Yeah. But in
And-
my game, magical things, they're not uncommon. And the more powerful you become and the more you kind of move through the world, everything, you'll come across stuff. And the creatures and NPCs you deal with have those things, so it's likely that you would come in contact with them too. But I'm running really high magic campaigns. So it's based on, setting. It's based on what system you're using. It's based on what level the characters are. Like there's a dozen different criteria for scaling just with loot, because you don't want to give your players gold. It's like, oh well, I know they're gonna sell this thing, so just bleh. Like this transfers into these are gold pieces. If you make gold so plentiful that they don't have to worry about it ever, you kind of run the risk of them losing the whole, like, yeah, sure, we've got to go and fight this thing, but how the hell are we going to get there? How the hell are we going to get back?
It's also just no satisfaction for just straight getting paid.
Yeah. Like, in Shadowrun, getting paid, it doesn't matter how much you get paid. There's always room for more Nuyen. Always. Because you could just always get the next biggest, best upgrade. Or, new spell foci and shit. Like,
when paying
there's
for
always
rent's
more
a big
stuff.
part of the game, you know that that money matters.
Yeah. Yeah, money matters. But in like D&D, you don't want to make it so much that you don't want to make it so difficult that they have to have a camping montage for every single night that they spend outside of a town, but you don't want to make it so easy that they don't care about it.
I think that depends on what, the level of the game people are running. If it's like high level, high fantasy, camping, who gives a shit? But it's low fantasy. It's like, all right, how many rations do you have? That's actually one of the things I'll do with my players is I won't ask it every night, but every long rest before they stop, I'll say, all right, how many rations do you have? And they'll be like, oh yeah, oh shit, we only have 5 and we have a 10-day trek ahead of us. I'm like, all right, well, make something happen. I'm like, all right, well, shit, what do we do? And mind you, these are like level 15 characters now, and it's still like, oh, I have to eat berries.
Magic berries.
Yeah, magic good berries.
Good berries are the best spell in the entire freaking game, in my opinion, because it doesn't matter what level you are. It doesn't matter. Like, you could use this as a bribe. Like, say, hey, here, you know what? This berry.
Hey man,
you eat this.
You look hungry.
This is a good berry.
If you eat this,
it's good.
You won't be hungry at all today.
It's an okay berry.
I'm no judge, but I hear these are pretty good.
See, now I was just thinking, on the flip side of all this, if you do introduce something powerful or something maybe even mysterious, like you don't know how it works right out the gate, or not right out the gate, but pretty soon into it, like maybe someone does get a hold of like maybe a usable item like a wand that has a certain amount of charges, then all of a sudden they can take on some of maybe something bigger that you have planned that you wanted to introduce a little earlier for the scary factor, but they now have the tools to do it. And if they have to use the tools to beat it, that's fine, that's what you planned for. But if they figure out a way to take on the encounter and save that for later, then they have the satisfaction of knowing they saved it, they earned it, they beat that shit.
Yeah, like a really good example of that.
Resource management is a big deal.
Yeah, a really good example of that is in the other game that I run, Shadows and Sin. Nick, you're not in this one, but I had set a party of 3 level 4 characters up against a Bahir. Or not a Bahir.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was a really big, high-powered demon.
Oh, okay.
It was really tough. And they're like, the likelihood of them being able to succeed against just staying in a straight-up fight was like 4%. But I know my players well enough to know that they're going to try and think a way around it. And I presented them with an opportunity beforehand. I said, hey, this guy is selling this portable hole half price. It's just about as much money as you got. Like, oh, okay. And then what they did, they proceeded to throw the portable hole down on the floor underneath it between its legs. It fell in, failed its deck save to hold on to the edge, and then peeled it up off the ground next turn. It couldn't get out.
Yep.
And eventually suffocated to death because even demons got to breathe. So the satisfaction they got from killing that thing and really sticking it to it, even though that thing is so much bigger and badder than they are, is... I guess you just got to know your players, because if I didn't know that they would come up with some shit like this and plan for that, then they probably would have got smooshed. That's a good example of the tools for the trade.
That's a good example. Well,
So I think
that's about time.
what we we didn't wrap this one up quite as nicely as last time, where we were like, oh yeah, the answer is blah.
Yeah,
This
we
is very
found an
much-
answer.
Yeah.
It's like, oh god, you got to. It's different every single time. You got to play it by ear. Sometimes it's the enemies, sometimes it's the players, sometimes it's resource management, sometimes it's the environment.
And a lot of dealing with it is just experience. If you're going to run a game, go run one. Get some experience under your belt, because you're not going to start out great. You're not.
Yeah, try it out. Do a one shot. Make sure if you're just trying stuff out, make sure you're not overly committed, and your players aren't overly committed to the characters, and that they know. I think what's amazing is what would be great for that is called a PC grind, where you make a stupid hard dungeon. Everyone makes 4 PCs, and they head into it. If one of them die, you pick up the next one, and that lets you see what works. What characters are good at what this is that. What you like, what your best at.
It also tells you how the players play normally and how they'll use the options presented to them.
That is also
lets you know,
one of the funnest campaigns I've ever been in before, too.
Oh, yeah,
PC grinders are really fun.
PC grinds are amazing.
It's pretty fun.
Except for when Nick is involved and he fucking fucks with the deck of many things. Fuck you.
I killed everyone, including the village that we were supposed to protect.
We found a deck of many things. We had these level 0 Pathfinder characters. Found a deck of many things. Nick drew 4 cards, and one of them was an earthquake. Not only did he kill everyone in the dungeon, he killed the dungeon, everyone outside the dungeon, all the villagers down the hill from the dungeon, and the city next to it.
My ghost got a lot of XP.
Yeah, I did. Yep. Team kill. Kill-tacular.
When the UI came up, you were just like, all right,
Death
report
rides.
player, friendly fire.
Absolutely.
It's like, do you want to inform Blizzard of this player being an asshole?
13,000 people voted to boot.
Beep, 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 brrr. Our servers are down.
See, my character didn't even see what happened, because the first card he drew, he went blind. And then
Oh, yeah.
and then he got a magical item, and then he killed everyone.
Yep. Ugh.
Yeah, the answer is play it, do it, live it, read the books, all of them.
Read the books, talk to your friends, who've run a lot of games before.
And listen to the next episode of Playing God when we come back for
Exactly.
Hell yeah.
Well, what's our topic for next time? Do we know?
that. Not yet.
Not yet. We will.
Yeah, that's the topic, not yet.
But you'll
Not
find
yet.
out.
How
Next time.
to wait during certain things when you're GMing.
The importance of
Oh
patience.
god, the importance of patience. That would be a good one.
Well, goodbye, everyone, and we'll see you next
Thanks
good
time.
for
night.
listening.
Thank you
Thanks
for
for
listening.
listening.
Have a good.
Goodbye.